Okay, we're in a hospitality conference, so we have to start with the toast. So everyone show me your drinks.
Is there a
Put them
bar?
up. All
Why
right.
are we the only ones drinking?
First, I always toast to family and health, but I also want to toast to the Omni Hotel and Influence Group for putting on a great conference and really showing us hospitality. So cheers to the group.
Cheers. Cheers.
Now, secondly, and more importantly, I wanted to make sure everyone had a drink because we're going to play a little game as we go through this process. Does everyone have a drink? If I or any of the panelists mention the word millennial or digital, you drink.
Oh.
Pretty fair? Yeah. There's whiskey in the back. So we do have a pretty exciting panel here, and I just want to give a quick background of who I am. I'm Sean McGuinness. I'm the Hospitality Business Director for Sargenti Architects. And I've had a pretty blessed career. I've gotten the opportunity to work with really smart people, from commercial real estate to design to culinary to operations. My whole life has been surrounded around food, obviously. This is no exception. Today, it's just a great opportunity to talk to people that are heavily involved in our industry. And they're the smart ones. They're the ones that are going to talk about what are they changing in their brands to meet their customers' expectations. And I'm going to keep quiet, and I'm going to let the team introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their brands and a little bit about themselves.
Hi, can you hear me? Yep. I'm David Milne. I'm head of design and architecture with Burger King. Previously, I have been with Wendy's, TGI Fridays in Dallas, Starbucks International in Seattle, and prior to that was overseas with stints in Hong Kong and South Africa. We've got a very, very aggressive rollout this year with Burger King, both internationally and domestically, a total of like 1,400 new stores, of which 900 of them will be international. So some of the things I'm going to talk about are the differences in the digital
Cheers.
offerings around the world and how we look at
trouble.
them differently, because often we tend to be US-centric, but there's actually a whole other world out there. So.
Great. We are on a slightly different scale. My name is Heidi Guerard. I'm the creative director with And Pizza. For those of you who are not familiar with the brand, we are just over 5 years old, based out of Washington, D.C. Company owned and operated at 26 units right now. So slightly different. My background prior to being with And Pizza was more on the service side from an architecture firm.
Great. I'm Jason Rusk. I recently, this last summer, celebrated my 20th year at Red Robin, and which makes me, I started when I was 9, and have done a lot of different things with them. I've gotten the opportunity to start in the field, run multi-unit operations, and then have done new restaurant development, our remodel program, ops services, and most recently have gotten the chance to head up both off-premise and our business innovation team. So lots changing in the casual dining environment, and looking forward to sharing a little bit more about how Red Robin's thinking about that.
Awesome. I'm Michael McHenry, president and co-founder of Even Stevens Sandwiches. Even Stevens is a Salt Lake City-based craft casual restaurant whose emphasis is sandwiches, because for every sandwich we sell, we donate a sandwich to a local nonprofit in the neighborhood. So it's been quite disruptive, and it's been an amazing time. I've spent, we've been in business since June of 2014, and so it's been a progressive 3.5 years. We just opened our 20th location and the opening of our 6th state in Seattle in December. So we've got big plans for growth this year as well. I've spent the last close to 15 years in the restaurant business. Academically, finance is my background, but professionally, brand building, talent development, concept creation has just been my wheelhouse. It's been my passion. And so just incredibly blessed for the opportunity. And I love how rich and ripe the restaurant industry is. So excited to share the good stuff taking place.
Good, good, great. Well, thank you for the
Oh,
introduction.
and I'm a millennial.
Cheers.
Oh my goodness.
It was getting a little
first
quiet
one.
there.
The first,
very first one.
Yeah, the very first, like the month
Trailblazer.
of, yeah, like the week of.
I, not a millennial, will, we really, we have a handful of questions, and we're going to talk about, again, how we are reaching our consumer and how we're focusing on meeting their and exceeding their expectations. And I really want to start with a very big brand. I mean, we all know Burger King, and I've known David for years, and he's got a vast knowledge in this industry, more specifically from an international perspective. So we want to look at, how's Burger King reaching their consumer and managing their expectations from a convenience factor, not only domestically but globally.
So what I wanted to talk about was digital self-order kiosks, because a lot of the bigger brands internationally are doing this. It's an expectation from the customers, driving sales as well, and what sort of things it does actually drive. As I was saying earlier, it's very different in different countries. So for instance, this is our new design domestically, and it's something that we're looking at rolling out internationally. For those of you who actually know Burger King, this is our kind of like current design, showing it without the kiosks. But then you get into areas like, this is France. Now, France is very different to the US. I'll give you an instance on like return on capital. In the US, 70% of our sales are through the drive-through. That means 30% is in store. And if you've got a restaurant which is doing, let's say, 1.6 million in average unit volumes, that means that 480,000 of that is in the dining room. Now, often in the lower performing stores, most of the sales are cash. So to put a digital kiosk in one of those is actually, when it might be for generating 180 to 200,000 in revenues, it's a much more difficult conversation to have with a franchisee to spend that sort of money, particularly in technology which is moving at the speed of light, and that a year from now might be out of date. In France, it's very different. Burger King is a much more elevated brand in France, and the average unit volumes are more like 6 million per store. Wow. So, and only 23% of the sales are through the drive-through. So 77% of the sales are in the dining room, and 40% of all those sales are on digital kiosks. So it's much more easy to go to the franchisee and say, let's put in the kiosks here. 99.5% of all Burger Kings in France have digital kiosks. It's probably the highest saturation in any of the markets that we have. But it's a much more easy conversation to have for that return on investment. Now, part of it is a cultural thing. Here in the US, we eat on the go. In France, they don't. It's a social occasion is eating. So they will come and they will stay in the restaurant for much longer than they would in the US. I recently went to one of the new restaurants in France, and sorry, I was pressing the wrong one there. And what I found was it took me 10 minutes to find a table after I'd ordered. Every single table, and this is a 230-seat restaurant, every single table was taken at lunchtime. Now, that's something we'd love to see here in the US, but it's just to show that it's something which culturally different. We have to be aware of that in actually rolling out the digital model. This is just another shot of the interiors. So these kind of look very different from what you'd find in the US, much more kind of upscale. Maybe the sun helps with the kind of filtering and the shadowing coming through. But much more adept to sit down and stay a while longer. When we look to Asia, it's different things that are driving the digital revolution there. Drink, guys.
Thank God.
I know, finally.
So in Asia, our customers are much more social media adept than we are here. We like to think that we're on the cutting edge. We're nowhere near it. it was shown earlier that South Korea there are actually streets ahead of us here, I hate to say it. But a lot of it is to do with a number of things. For instance, if you start looking in China, because there's the Great Firewall that doesn't allow Facebook to be there, they've developed their own things like WeChat. Millions and millions of users, and WeChat is tied into pay systems as well. So, for instance, you can go to a street vendor in Beijing and you can use your phone to pay for it, something that just doesn't happen here unless it's in a bigger vendor with Apple iPay or something like that. So the expectation there is much higher than it is here, coupled with the fact that a lot of the manufacturers are actually based there with Samsung, et cetera. So working with the hardware, it's much easier to get that innovation through there. So this is an example of one of our restaurants in China as well. You can see multiple kiosks here, something that is, you would probably only get that in an inline location, high volume inline location in the US, but much more driven in Asia. A lot of it, again, to do with the labor costs there. Some of the other things that I wanted to talk about, the benefits here. So basically, what we have found that it does increase sales. The average ticket price is actually up. In the US, it's probably about $1. In France, it is actually €1 at average increase in check. Now, that's because people customize a lot more. A lot of people either didn't know that you could customize, or if they were standing at the old POS system and they've got 5 people behind you and you're kind of feeling pressured to make a decision and you just opt for the number 5 or the number 3 or whatever it is like that. You don't go and say, well, I'd like a brioche bun with that or whatever. You get that customization opportunity on a kiosk. The other thing is customer satisfaction. So when you're in control of your ordering, you feel that the customer accuracy is going to, or the food accuracy is going to be much higher because you actually put it into the system, not somebody behind a POS system. So the expectation is that the accuracy is going to be higher, and that actually lives up to snuff. The customer experience, the engagement. So I'm not a millennial. And so the emotional connection with the brand is often on that old face-to-face with somebody behind the POS. But nowadays, with the M folk and people younger than them, the expectation is actually through this. And to give an example, I always say, if my son or my daughter, if I actually call them on the phone, they'll never pick it up. If I text them, I immediately get something back. So they have a connection with a screen. So it's much easier for them to have that connection when they're actually in a restaurant. They feel that is the emotional connection actually through a screen. It doesn't have to be a face-to-face.
And David, could we segue off of that and talk about the emotional connection that our consumers have with the brand? And maybe even just pivoting off of from a kiosk in a digital perspective, how, I'm trying to overemphasize that, but let's look at the touch points from really a human aspect and why I'm an admirer of And Pizza in terms of the culture that they're building with their brand and their tribe. I want to pass it over to Heidi so she can kind of articulate what they're doing from a consumer perspective. And just to kind of tail off on David, we're obviously meeting the consumer need from a convenience factor, and how do we soften that with really the human touch of the business?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely a conversation that we're having right now, is how you're meeting both of those guests' needs. There's certainly the amount of guests who are in there just for the quick convenience factor, but there's also a lot of our guests who come in for that interaction. And so, our hiring practices have really from day one been focused around giving that experience. One of the causes that we have chosen to stand behind is the raising the minimum wage. It's something that we have done from day one, is always being committed to not only paying above a minimum wage, but also setting every single one of our tribe members on their own personal development path, which has been very rewarding. And I think that type of care and engagement with our tribe certainly translates to that ultimate guest experience.
Are you finding that you're keeping staff, you're keeping employees, and that upfront training cost is actually the return, that you're not having to retrain managers?
Exactly. I mean, certainly we could put the numbers and the ROI behind it. Even just this afternoon when I was sneaking away to check on my email, there was an announcement about Brittany Wilkins, and she's been with our tribe for about 3 years, starting on the line, then becoming shift manager, then traveling with our NSO training team, and has just now recently, as of today, been promoted to shop leader for our East Street shop. So it's stories like that that are
Awesome.
did I say millennial?
Oh, you did now, yeah.
I'll
Cheers
cheers
to
to that
that,
anyway,
yeah.
to Brittany. It's stories like that that I think get me very excited, get our team very excited, and that naturally translates to that guest experience being elevated.
Really creating a culture and a community behind the brand, which is certainly exciting. And as that transitions into our kind of next topic and our next focus is just on third party and off-premise, and the innovation that Red Robin is doing in terms of expanding the brand outside of the space, and even using third party and having them become an advocate and extension of their community. And Jason, you and I have had a handful of conversations. 50% we remember, 50% we don't. But of the ones that we did, tell us how you're creating or reducing the friction points that not only the consumer, but the operator and the delivery driver go through, and how you're reducing that.
Yeah, so again, you're right. Half of them started like this, and the other half I don't remember. But I will tell you that, the casual dining category as we know it is evolving. And for many of you who have worked or are working on casual dining, different aspects of casual dining, it's challenging out there. And we know that some of the challenges really are about the changing consumer. So first, I just want to touch a little bit about how the consumer is behaving different and what they're doing that is different. And again, I think throughout this whole conference, we heard a lot about change and the changing consumer, but think back to your last Christmas and how many times did you go to the mall versus how many times you went to the mall 8, 10 years ago, right? Because of Amazon, because of the way that convenience of online ordering, it's changed a category which was a stopping off point into something that needs to be a destination, or maybe differently, a source of food, great food. It's not that casual dining occasions won't exist, it's that they're evolving and shifting. When you think about sitting on your couch and ordering DoorDash or ordering the burger that you love from a restaurant like Red Robin and getting the convenience delivered to your home, it's life-changing. I don't know if any of you have ever done it before, but it is life-changing. And so we know that our consumer is changing, and we've really focused on off-premise. And we think of that as catering, delivery, and carry-out. And several years back, as we really stood this up, we were at about half of what other casual dining chains were at as it related to off-premise, and there was a big opportunity there. So after really evaluating those, kind of what's going on and why is the consumer doing that, oftentimes I think people try to focus on, let's introduce technology or things because it's super cool, it's super interesting. But we took a different approach. We said, well, what are the obstacles and what are the barriers that consumers run into? And how do we alleviate those things? So think of it as an example when you're driving away from a place and you just have your to-go food in your back, whether it's a QSR or casual dining restaurant, nothing is more frustrating than not getting what you ordered. So removing the barriers is really what we focused on. And the example that I would give you is if we know order accuracy is so important, then do everything you possibly can, both operationally and from the consumer-facing standpoint, to remove those barriers. Like things such as we have clear tops in our packaging so that you can see what food item is in that. We have ventilation to help keep the fries crispy versus getting soggy and not having any moisture be able to escape. We also introduced clear bags, so I can say, yep, I ordered four items, now I see four items in the bag. So really start from the consumer standpoint, or what are the barriers to entry there? We also knew that the building was a big piece of this as well. Not only does operations have to deliver on that experience, but the building has to be set up for it. Back on the expo line, you have to have enough area or space for volume of to-go boxes, which are traditionally maybe a little bit bigger, at least in casual dining, than what you would see coming out the window for dine-in. We also know that, gosh, guests want convenience. If I'm a mom pulling up in my minivan, getting out of my car with unloading the 3 kids, going into a busy restaurant, into a busy lobby, probably not conducive. So we introduce things like curbside. Or, clear stations in the restaurant where you know as a guest where to go to pick up your food. So I think for all of you, I would recommend just think about, from the consumer standpoint, what are the barriers on the off-premise occasion? Because I will promise you, it is not going away. That's like saying QSR isn't going to have drive-thrus anymore. The world is changing. And I think the last thing, which is also equally important, is how did your brand come across to consumers off-premise? If I'm now paying $10 for a Red Robin burger to get it delivered to me or carried out, well, what makes Red Robin's brand come alive differently? For those of you who are users of Red Robin, those bottomless steak fries are delicious, we all know. But you can't get bottomless off-premise, or maybe can you? Think back to your last experience of a QSR when you drove through a Chick-fil-A or whatever, In-N-Out. What's the very first thing you're doing in that bag? Reaching in and grabbing some fries. So instead, you don't have to worry about that at Red Robin. We'll give you a free cup of fries to go for your drive home. And the cool part is we're doing that not just for guests that are getting to go, but also delivery, third-party drivers that are coming in and picking up the food. Because why? They're an ambassador of your brand whether you know it or not. They're the representation, that human element. And so how do we get them excited? So we really took a holistic approach as it related to off-premise about how we approach that occasion.
Thank you for that. And we're kind of leading into Michael, and we actually surprisingly have a ton of time on our hands. And we don't need to take every minute. We're going to get to some Q&A. Yeah. But I do want to hand it over to Michael and just talk about kind of bringing it back to the space. I mean, we're all looking at what these first 3 brands have done to reach the need of the consumers, whether it's the convenience factor or offering digital kiosk. From the human aspect of creating a culture that just helps build and thrive the brand. Off-premise, which is really kind of table stakes of the industry. You have to do it, so how are you going to make improvements to make that journey for both sides more complementary? And then I kind of want to bring it back to the place, to the neighborhood. And we have it. Community is our recipe book, and I think it's so important, especially coming from an emerging brands perspective, and I'm fortunate enough to have you in my market, and I profess the brand frequently, again, not being a millennial.
Hot water.
So, my table over there. Michael, talk about your brand and the time and the thoughtfulness that you put into the space and actually creating a community and a culture around each individual unit, and how is that sustained throughout your growth?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first you had me at French fries, so grab a cup to go, and we're set on the burgers. Sean, I could spend the next 30 minutes talking about this alone because it's such an intimate and intentional approach that we take to community. And when you see that, it's not for surface. This is not just some locker room pep talk or a huddle taking place there that you can see in this community as our recipe book. I mean, site selection goes far beyond demographics, densities, expendable incomes to us, even tapestry. We really unpack that. We want to know why people are living there. We want to know how long they plan on staying around, and we seek a high sense of community for that. Because for Even Stevens, it's fundamental. As we come into the neighborhood, not only are we pretty confident, pretty poised that we're going to come to the neighborhood and achieve our goals and missions and really our aspirations, but to get directly involved in achieving the goals and well-being of the neighborhood at the exact same time. And it goes far beyond our Sandwich for Sandwich initiative. When we come into the neighborhood, we're rubbing shoulders, we're touching kind of belly to belly. We're getting to meet coffee roasters and breweries and other bakers and local artists. And we're doing that because we intentionally walk those sidewalks. We intentionally visit those bars and those music venues. And we get to really we get to know the neighborhood beyond just a high five and a handshake and a tip, but in a real partnership. In a real partnership that really has allowed us to scale a lifestyle-driven brand that no two are the same. Just like no two of us are the same, no two of our brands are the same, and no two neighborhoods are the same. And so when I reference that it's very intentional, you look at, and I see where the slides are here. I hope I can go back to these. But you look at our local immersion. This is huge because we probably have one of the most gifted, I would say, and again, it sounds a little biased up here, but one of the most gifted artisan bread chefs, I believe, in our great states here. And we don't make our own bread. Even Stevens intentionally comes into the neighborhood and we identify a local bakery that we care about. And chef and the local bakery collaborate on a bread, and we take our business with theirs. Vice versa, we take their business with ours. And it's something that we really pride ourselves on, is really finding a way that we can come in and really improve and better community through what we love and through our craft and through our mission. I mean, it's what we know is most infinite to what we're doing is the more sandwiches we sell, the more people we can serve. And it's not a novelty, it's not something that we take lightly. We've been in the industry, like I mentioned before, I've spent my career in it. My peers and I, we've been from startup to enterprise on a handful of other brands. But this is really a brand where we've been able to really marry compassion with action. Mm-hmm. And it's put us in the driver's seat of something pretty unique because we've also disrupted not only the way that I believe that we come into the marketplace and we scale uniquely with real intent, we've also changed the way we hire. We talk about culture, you talk about the tribe, and by the way, cheers to not millennial or digital, but to the culture that you've created, because that is, when I look out here, and I'm sure a handful of you, at least they say about 40% of those in the restaurant industry look at hiring as one of their biggest challenges, like something that's in the way of achieving their ultimate success. And at Even Stevens, we've shifted that paradigm. Why? Because we've identified a workforce differently. Even Stevens is out there identifying individuals in the neighborhood that want to make a difference, that really believe in that neighborhood, they care about their neighbors, they want to see a positive impact, and then we in turn hire them and teach them how to put two slices of bread together. And what that's done is it's not only created a unique and really a kind of a talent pool of our own in the industry, we also see that our employee turnover is less than half that of the national averages in quick service and fast casual. And those of you that own and operate your businesses and understand the impact, just the sheer cost avoidance by really prioritizing your team member as your number one, I promise you that yields such a great return. And so just approaching neighborhood with intent is just critical to our success. And I encourage all of you to take advantage of that if you're not already.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. Before we open it up to questions, I'm going to come up with just random questions, appropriate for the room, of course. As you evolve your brands, from large scale where it has to be a massive challenge, turning the Titanic, creating new innovation within a space, to an emerging brand where you can be a bit more agile. Tell us about, collectively, take your time, what are some of the challenges that you're facing with the evolution of your brands?
One of the things, if I might start, you were talking about hiring, and we had this conversation over lunchtime, not necessarily the people in the restaurant, but our corporate headquarters. I don't know if you know, but the CEO of Burger King is 37 years old. He came on board when he was 32 years old. The CFO was 31 years old. He has now, this last week, he has taken over being responsible for digital innovation for IT. He's moved from the CFO to the IT role. And I can guarantee you, you're going to see a quantum shift in the way that Burger King starts looking at innovation, with these young people who are, have been brought up with this technology actually driving the brand. Not, normally, your CEOs or CFOs are probably in their mid-50s or something like that. But here is a legacy brand, a huge brand, 60,500 stores, being driven by this very, very young team. And if you do a little bit of background into 3G Capital, who actually own Restaurant Brands International, so that's Burger King, Tim Hortons, and Popeyes, you'll find that they move people literally every 18 months, often into roles that they are not skilled to do. You might get somebody from finance being moved into operations, someone from operations moved into marketing, but they are very, very smart young people, and a lot of them have got Ivy League MBAs and very, very quick learners. And they are looking at that part of the business with completely new eyes and coming up with great ideas about how to move the business forward. And I think that's one thing that, in the next few years is really going to set Burger King apart from some of the other brands, is the actual incredibly young leadership, which is actually pushing the innovation on all parts, not just digital.
Yeah, I like that. And I appreciate the more positive spin on the questioning. And I'm actually going to pivot my question and talk about what are some of the greatest successes you've all seen in terms of, that's a massive cultural shift in terms of literally younger skill set, younger talent, and flip-flopping roles. I mean, going from a CFO to a digital position, that's a massive shift in the dynamic of a business culture. So what other successes are you all seeing from your businesses? Heidi?
I'm going to jump back to your previous question, actually, because it's kind of exciting.
No, that's fine. Yeah, you already had it teed up. Go with it.
Well, it's kind of interesting, and I think we have a similar story in our brand in that we've really built it around the community and being hyper local and tapping into what is the story that's unique to that particular shop, that neighborhood, that tribe. And so one of the biggest challenges that we have, and I'm not going to frame it as a success story because we're still trying to figure it out, is how that translates, because we do have an increasing number of guests who are only experiencing us either through the digital storefront or through third-party delivery, and so we can't treat it in the same way where we know when you walk through the doors you're going to have an experience, and we can curate that experience and be very thoughtful and intentional and put a lot of meaning behind all the touch points. How does that translate? So I hate to bring up a question without an answer, but it's certainly where a lot of the conversations in our office are right now, is how does that translate? I'm not sure if you're dealing with a similar struggle right now.
Well, I think it's always ongoing for us. I think that's probably something that excites me most about the restaurant industry, is every day brings this new and exciting opportunity for us to just unpack things further and to just better understand not necessarily the psychology of it, but just experience creation, in itself. I was lucky with the prompter here, so my slides are just hanging up there.
Go for it. Go for it.
The branding opportunity. I figured they passed it down. If you're going to go last, I guess you get to control that. But we look at Even Stevens, and we talk about design as strategy. But to us, about 60, almost 70% of our portfolio is more than 70 years old. And so we're out there seeking great bones, great legacy, a celebration of community where we're able to, like if you take that shop there on the bottom, that's our second location. And from like the 1930s and 1970s, it was a Ford mechanic shop. And what's cool about that is that we're able to pull those archives and bring in local artists and bring in influence and legacy from the neighborhood and marry that with brand. And at Even Stevens, I believe that we've defined and created a concept where there's this true marry of community and brand, not brand and community. Like we really put how we believe that we can serve and further community through, our mission and our craft. And it starts really, again, foundationally in our dining rooms, because we're encouraging those to sit together, to communal there together, to break bread and share, what the kind of heartbeat is and what's taking place there. And so that's an opportunity for us because there's not enough of it taking place. And so as we're maximizing conveniences, as we're introducing digital, as much as we love our spaces and what we're creating, yes, of course, us millennials,
He's drinking water.
yeah,
by
I'm
the way.
drinking
That's
water,
not
by the
fair.
way, yeah. But we see an opportunity where, even though we put this type of intent, about 45% of our revenue comes, from takeout and online. And so we have this opportunity where we're opening up the brand digitally, where that kind of decision's left into their hands, and we're also guiding, in essence, digitally as well. We want to get as much of that experience happening long before the first bite. And so I think that's probably one of our biggest ongoing opportunities is how do we create that type of essence and experience that we do in the human connection inside of our dining rooms, associating that with our craft and our mission. How do we do that digitally and online? It's just an ongoing opportunity for us, for sure.
And I think one of the things, it was touched on by a couple of speakers before, and I'm a great believer, is I think the future of the whole ordering thing is in this. It's, not in the hardware in your stores, because that's going to be ever changing. The speed of innovation, particularly in the technology sector, is so fast that by the time that you've actually installed these kiosks in your stores, it's out of date, or the software's out of date. One of the slides, my last slide that was on there, was about what is the next. Facial recognition has already been started and being tested out by Caliburger in Pasadena, California. So you can actually go up to the kiosk and it recognizes you. And it can actually come up with your last order and, do you want to just order the same thing again? And the other thing is voice technology. I'm a personal believer that apps are actually going to disappear. And it's all going to be through chatbots, that you will actually be able to talk to your phone and just say, I want a Whopper with such and such, blah, blah, blah. And all your payment systems are already in there. And it'll actually do all that ordering for you, whether it's delivery or whether you actually go to the store to get it. I really believe that is where the future is going with this.
Mm-hmm. Jason, you have successes or challenges that you'd like to talk about?
I think for us, it's easy to say that, gosh, the restaurant space hasn't had to really be innovative. That it's just now that things are really changing. However, if you look back on the past, think of the last time that you sat in a Red Roof Pizza Hut and ate pizza. Innovation is happening all around us. Disruption and change is happening all around us. And I think the biggest thing that we deal with as a company that's $1.4 billion, we're not overly massive, we're not small, but how do you get your teams to change with you? How do you get them to be the ambassadors of change? And not just change to survive, but change to thrive. And that really starts culturally from within, and I think every person that works in your organization has got to understand that it's not the company driving the change, it's the consumer. And if you listen to what they are saying, what they are doing, how they are responding, and adapt to that consumer, you will always be relevant. And do it in your brand's way, the way that is true to who you are, and you'll always be successful.
Oh, that's great. So, to put it in one word, what does the consumer want? And one word only. And how are you reaching the consumer? Convenience could be a word. We're not going to use digital or millennial. What is the consumer looking for? One word.
Experience.
Authenticity.
Yeah.
Connection.
That connection. I'd agree with that connectivity.
There's all the answers. It's right there.
One of the things that I think that I just also wanted to touch on was like the use of social media. Burger King has been really good recently in actually connecting through to a larger audience through social media by using their ad budget very well. Creating advertisements or concerns that actually go viral. Some of them you might have known, the one about bullying or the one about net neutrality, which just went around the world like wildfire, with 7 or 8 million hits on it. A thing that they did actually last year, which I thought was very amusing, was they had an advertisement, I don't know if any of you saw it, it was on TV, and it started off saying, a guy behind the counter saying, you know, I just wanted to tell you about the new Whopper in Burger King, but I've only got 15 seconds to do it, so let me try this. And he reached into the camera and he said, hey Google, what's a Whopper? And Google homes all around the country just started opening up and saying, Whopper, from Wikipedia, the Whopper is such and such and such and such. And it was like just an example of how you can actually use that kind of stuff. You know, it drove a lot of people mad, but you know, if it was actually close enough to the TV, all these things were suddenly going off. You know, and I thought it was a really clever use of social media to just test that out.
That's great. That's a great example. And now that I'm absolutely shocked, I had nightmares about this session because I thought we would massively run over the time. I know everyone has had a really long day, and I really appreciate everyone's participation, certainly the panel. And I really just want to open up, I'm assuming Michael's out there somewhere. No? Well, we can yell. Questions for the floor? Sir, right there in the, yep. Yeah, yell it. I'm not finding Michael, so is there a mic in the back?
It's okay,
Okay, let's hear it.
Yeah.
I'll repeat the question.
Okay, so the title of our conference is RestaurantSpaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And what a lot of the panel and earlier panels have talked about is there's a lot of food leaving the building, right?
Right.
Man, all the way on the right here, it's about 40% or something, everything leaving the building,
Yeah.
takeout, delivery, that kind of thing. Okay, so has anyone done anything innovative to send your space or your brand home, right?
Did everyone hear the question? Just really quick, the question being, how are we taking the experience out to the consumer?
How do you send your brand home?
Yeah.
So that, because that's where the new experience is, whether we like it or not.
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Jason.
You know, I'll say, quite frankly, I don't know that anybody's figured that out yet. You know, I do believe that there are ways of core brand attributes that you have, like bottomless for Red Robin and giving a fry cup to go or giving extra fries, that do share a little bit of what you get in restaurant. But, you know, I think really the reality is it's the wild, wild west. If you look at third-party delivery, there was massive expansion, massive consolidation, and they're trying to figure out, just like brands are, what's happening. And the other thing that makes it even more complicated when you bring a third party in is they are no longer your consumer. As a restaurant chain, they are now a Grubhub loyalist, or they're a DoorDash or Uber Eats or whatever it is, which makes it yet even more challenging. And I think for us, it's looking at all the assets that we have going off premise, and how do we make sure that at every single touch point, those meet on what their demands are. And when you break it down to the core of what it is, you go to places for, I like their food, I get it when I want it, it's good quality. And so rather than focusing on so much of, take Red Robin as the example, how can we make you know, a kid like super happy because that's what happens in our restaurant? That's actually not the table stakes at home. So the occasion does pivot and shift depending on what's going on. Why? Because they're sitting in front of the TV. So the things like order accuracy, food temp, and timeliness become that much more important because that's what your brand is at that point. So I don't know that answers your question because I don't know that anyone's really figured it out. But take Domino's as a great example of transparency. Non-industry channels are impacting what consumers really expect and want. So the reason why you like Domino's and get it to go isn't, frankly, maybe for their quality of their pizza, but I know where it is, when it's going to get to my house, and I can track that pizza all the way along. And so, you know, your brand has to come to life, I think, off-premise in really unique and differentiating ways, which is going to get even more muddy the more that third party expands, the more that self-delivery and other restaurants expand. And yeah, it's changing.
Yeah, from a shareholder point of view, just look at the share price of Domino's over the past 5 years. It's, you know, you will not get a better rate of return than investing in Domino's. It was incredible.
Sean, it's interesting. I want to make a quick comment on your question as well, because of course, checking all the boxes of accuracy, we've expanded into online, into catering, into curbside. We're introducing currently to the third-party delivery. But even Stevens, we've defined a concept that reminds customers to vote with their wallet and really flex their influence on creating a more equitable experience in the neighborhood. And so to us, we spend a lot of time sending home influence so that we can gain advocacy. Because for Even Stevens, we aren't out there investing in a lot of billboard, radio, a lot of digital, any couponing, direct mail, or anything from that aspect. We are, every time we sell a sandwich, we donate and make an investment right back into the neighborhood. So to us, we're really focused on taking home an experience that you're going to share with others, because we grow through that advocacy. And we can say, so you're saying you're scaling a brand across the country with word to mouth, and we have the stomach for a ramp that's a little different than most. But that type of advocacy is rewarding, and I won't share too much depth, but we're seeing gross per square foot around $1,000 a location, and with nothing on your menu over $10, you can see the type of traffic that we're seeing and visiting by neighborhood, and so we send home influence. That's we package that up, bottle that up, and send that home so that we can create that type of advocacy. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to share that other side of the perspective.
I would say we're exploring the packaging right now. Our pizza is a unique shape, and therefore our box is a unique shape, and it's sort of become this icon of the brand and something that we've chosen to have a lot of fun with in our shops. And so it's the one thing outside of the order accuracy and the more operational issues that we know will make its way all the way to the guest wherever they eventually are. And so being very fun and inventive with that, we tend to change our box artwork about every 4 to 6 weeks. So right
cool.
now,
that's rad. That's so cool.
If we can flip back, there's a slide on there somewhere.
It's dead.
But the box that's in our shops right now, for instance, we did a 4-week campaign around blank and pizza, and sent out blank boxes to all of our guests and encouraged them to engage with the brand and come back to us with what they would fill in the blank with. So we have, at this point, distributed probably 750,000 boxes with Marley McFly, who was our winner out of the DC market, with his artwork and his interpretation. So, wherever we can find those moments to relay the story back to the guest wherever they will eventually interact with our brand, is what we're exploring now.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
No other questions? Okay, well, do you have any?
No, I
I just got one thing.
Yep.
There was a lack or failure in communication because I didn't get the email about the hair gel.
I was going to close and say, this definitely was the best hair
We
panel
planned this,
or session of the day.
I just do it to make me look taller.
I just do it because I still have it, and while I have it, I'm going to celebrate it. Yeah.
I have no comment. Let's leave it at
David,
that.
we wanted you to actually wear the hat, though. I was expecting that.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Well, thank you guys for a very engaging session here, and a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.